Hey readers, moment in your life where like you were telling a story and someone else was telling a story at the same time, but then one of you cut in, you were like, no, wait, that's not how it goes. Remember there was like this part, or the other person is like, no, you're forgetting to add this. The reason that happens is because in life, things are often told from different point of views. Now, I want you to think about those moments and recognize that this is true in stories too. So today what I want to talk to us about is how readers recognize point of view in a story, and they recognize that the way a story is told, or the point of view that the story is told from, actually affects the story itself. To remind you, take a look here where point of view can be first or third person. First person is usually the main character telling the story. You'll see like I frequently. The third person might be an outside person, usually the narrator. Think of it as the author, his or herself, is actually writing the book instead. Here's an example for you. Percy Jackson, he tells the story himself, versus Harry Potter. It's J.K. Rowling who's writing everything that's happening, narrating everything that's happening. Now, we know that stories are told from different point of views. So the first step is obviously to identify the point of view. But the second step is to ask yourself, how does this point of view affect the story? If we're thinking about a first person narrative, again, Percy Jackson, you know it's going to affect the tone or the mood. You have to ask, how does this influence the order of events that we're told? If it's the third person narrative, you might be saying, well, how might the story have been told if the main character had told these parts? Like, how would it have been different if it were in the other point of view? Let me give you an example again, going back to Percy Jackson. When Percy's telling the story, you see things through his eyes. You don't get the whole picture. You don't know the background information. You don't know the little secrets to what's going on behind the scenes. What you do know, though, is what it's like to be Percy Jackson. You put yourself physically in his shoes. You feel what he's feeling. Versus if we think about Harry Potter written in the third person, this totally affects the story in a different way. For example, we understand things that Harry doesn't. We know what's going on behind the scenes. We know what the different conversations are. We know what's going to happen. Harry does not. Okay? One is not right, one is not wrong. They're just different, and they lend themselves to stories in different ways. Check out my example from The Third Wish. The first thing, again, that you have to do is you have to identify the point of view, which is exactly what I've done. It's written in third person. Mr. Peters isn't telling the story. But then you have to ask yourself, how does this affect the story? We know it affects the story. Don't just say it affects the story. We know that. We're looking at how does it affect the story. We can understand that there's more trouble in the story than just the struggling swan at the beginning. Mr. Peters cannot anticipate this because he's so confident that he's going to use his wishes wisely. We know that's not the case. And then we also know Lita's real internal turmoil, like her real inner struggles. We know those because the narrator is telling us them. Mr. Peters does not. He only knows what Lita is sharing with him. So this gives us a different point of view as we read the story. I have one final tip for you to think about as you think about the point of view in your story, so who's telling the story, and then you think about how it affects the story. What you're really thinking of when you're looking to analyze the how is think of the what nots or what ifs. What do I mean by that? Well, what if this had been told this way? Or what if it was this character revealing this? Or what instead of the narrator telling the story, how would it be different if it was this character? What would change that? The big question really is, how would the story be different? So today, you're going to notice the point of view, you're going to name the point of view, and then you're going to think about ways that the story is affected because it's told through that point of view. Take a look at your slide, finish the rest of the steps, and happy reading.